I never remember being instructed on how to use a parachute. We were usually taught forced landing was the better way. If the engine cut, try to save the aeroplane if you can by making as good a forced landing as you could. Don't be a bleeding hero, just try to get it down safely. If you knew you were near an American airfield, you would always choose that, partly because they were full of admiration for us flying, and the food was better in the mess, you got a good lunch, and also they would take you to the PX, which was their equivalent of Maffei, their shop. And there they would let you buy lipstick and chocolate and stockings. The proudest achievement of my life, obviously, was flying the Spitfire, being allowed to fly this aircraft which everyone knew about. It sort of saved the country in the Battle of Britain, and I was allowed to fly it. I don't think I could do anything that would make me prouder than that. There's a story that even when he couldn't subdue us in the Battle of Britain, Hitler got cross with Goring and said, "What do you want to wipe out this Air Force?" And Goring said, "A squadron of Spitfires."
Joy tells her story so charmingly that you could easily forget just how much nerve it took climbing into a Spitfire with so little experience in the middle of the war.
And would she have found it difficult to fly the Spitfire?
Well, I don't think so. I think the Spitfire's a delight to fly. I think as long as you follow the basic rules of, you know, opening the throttle slowly on takeoff and treating the aeroplane with respect, it's actually a delight to fly.
So the only thing she would have difficulty with, I suppose, would be the prejudice of some of the male pilots who would have thought a girl couldn't do a thing like that.
Exactly, and I bet there was a little bit of that, but probably laid to rest when, you know, a Spitfire arrived out of the gloom on a foggy day and a young lady stepped out of it.
Well, a lot of the pilots would have liked that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, quite right.
MH434 was delivered to RAF Hornchurch in Essex, where it became the favourite plane of an ace South African airman, Flight Lieutenant Pat Lardner-Burke. He had already established a reputation as a top-class fighter pilot when he received his brand-new Mark 9 Spit. He revelled in being centre stage in battle, but he was less keen on the limelight in peacetime. Remarkably, his children are only finding out now, 40 years after his death, what an extraordinary man their father was. When did you first see all the stuff that your father had?
Was probably only about 2 months ago.
Really?
Well, I've always known that it's, you know, it's been in the family, but my mother, as a good a hoarder as she was, she generally had it, all of this stuff was boxed up and kept in the attic.
This is an amazing treasure trove, isn't it? What is this?
Well, I think here you have got the seat for the Spitfire, and this is the parachute, named as Squadron Leader Lardner-Burke, so
it's written on it.
Ready to go. So he would have been flying Spitfires at that time.
We'd have to look after that, right. We've got his boots, haven't we?
The flying boots, I understand the idea of these was that the fur part was detachable, so that they could actually, if they were shot down over the continent, they would detach this part of the boot, or the top part, so that they could then just walk out and pretend that they were a French civilian, possibly.
And walk their way to Switzerland if they were
hopefully,
lucky.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, this is the famous helmet.
This is the proper, this is the proper helmet, yes.
When we think of a Spitfire pilot, we think of them wearing one of these.
Well, this, I can promise you this is original.
Yeah, the goggles.
The goggles, the oxygen mask.
What's it like for you seeing this equipment that your father had?
It has reignited our father's memory.
That's your dad there, isn't it?
It is, yes. That is Natal Squadron, Treble 2 Squadron, based at Hornchurch, and he would have been flying 434.
So these would be his flying friends, and that's him. Looks as if he's alongside a Spitfire, doesn't it?
It does, yes. That's certainly him. This is the 222 Squadron.
And where is he in the picture?
Sitting on the front row, seated with, seems to have the squadron dog in front of him.
Squadron dog. He seems to be keen on dogs.
He does, yes. We never saw any of that in later life.
Do you wish you could have asked him about the war when you knew him?
I would say that we actually spoke very little about it, if at all. He certainly wasn't going to start discussing the war with his young children, so very, very little. He died when I was 14, so I do feel that perhaps we would have if I was a little older and, you know, we'd have had a pint of beer in a pub, I think maybe we could have spoken about it, but as we were children, it was never discussed.
Martin never had the chance to talk to his dad about the war, but his father's logbook reveals that this was really where they played with fire, the English Channel. Our Spitfire marshalled the skies over this strip of sea. It provided cover for Allied bombers heading for German targets in France.
Within 3 weeks of our Spitfire being built, it was in action against the Luftwaffe, and for 7 of some of the most difficult months of the war in 1943, this aircraft was right in the thick of it. And you can imagine what it'd be like streaking out over the channel as we are now, and at any moment you could be hit by German raiders. In fact, you were hoping to meet German raiders. Your job was to defend England.
Martin has allowed me to read the logbook and also 222 Squadron's operational flying diary, written during the war at debriefing sessions which were held after his father's missions in MH434. It's a remarkable account. On August the 27th, 1943, Lardner-Burke set off at 1830 hours from his base in Essex. He was a member of 222 Squadron, which had 12 Spitfires in operation that day. They were providing cover for 240 American B-17 bombers, flying fortresses each loaded with 8,000 pounds of bombs. Pat Lardner-Burke died in 1970. But there are still a few men left who know exactly what it feels like to have to set off in a Spitfire to defend Britain nearly 70 years ago.
Once you're up there, you're part and parcel of the aeroplane. You can't be terrified.
Doesn't even take the time that it's now taking me to speak to you. You're away, you're getting on with the job.
Once you were in that aeroplane, then a totally resignation came in. I'm here, I've got to go, I'm going to do it.
Really, when you're in it so tight with the straps done up so that when you happen to turn upside down, you don't bang your head on the hood.
And I'm going to do my very best to get back and do as much damage to those Black Cross gentlemen as I possibly can.
They crossed the Kent coast and then joined the bombers over the Channel. They went over the French coast at Beck near Calais. They then turned north and hit very heavy flak. 2 of the planes were hit and 7 of the airmen were reported to have bailed out.
Flak is just a shell that explodes at a certain height. And they used to get our height, absolutely. The bomber crews had to just stay in position. They had to take anything that was going. I admired them immensely.
We were defending this country against the King's enemies. And we knew anybody who thought at all would know that the effort that was being put in by the Germans and the Luftwaffe, they weren't doing it for fun. They weren't doing that for fun. And we had to stop them. That was the important thing. Not whether Jim shot down 10 and Bill shot down 1 and poor old Sid didn't get any. It didn't matter who shot down what. It never worried me. It never worried me. But what was important was that these Germans were up to no good and they had to be stopped.